Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are very excited. We have a special guest here with us. And so I don't give it away. What I'm going to do is say hello to Jamie, my partner, ask her how she's doing, and I will let her spill the beans on who we have with
Great.
us today. How's it going?
Good, good. Happy to be here and happy to have our very esteemed guest, the one and only Florence Christophers. Florence is a trauma-informed certified health coach with an expertise in sugar and food addiction recovery. Florence has been researching, coaching, and walking the path of recovery in the food addiction space for over 30 years. Florence has a bachelor's and master's degree in philosophy and also is being certified as a somatic experiencing practitioner. She is founder and co-host, or excuse me, host of the world's first summit on the topic of sugar and sugar addiction. She calls that the Kick Sugar Summit. Many of our listeners, I'm sure, are familiar with the work. And she offers online courses and coaching programs that teach her signature approach to help individuals unhook from the addictive pull of processed foods and create lasting lifestyle changes. She has a proven track record of helping individuals reverse metabolic diseases such as obesity, diabetes, and depression. So glad that you have us here, Florence. Tell us, I have a feeling that bio maybe scratches the surface a little bit for you, but tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got into this work, and then we'll talk about where you're going.
Okay, sounds great. So I think like most of us, we hit a wall with metabolic symptoms. So for me, physical and mental breakdowns that just weren't being managed by mainstream medicine. I just kept going back in for more pharmaceuticals. If it wasn't one thing, it was another. I was constantly struggling with some sort of what I now know to be the harms of ultra processed food consumption. So for me, it started really, really young. I started with migraines like 3, 4 years old. And then by the time, and then all throughout my childhood, I had colds and flus and tired and just kind of sort of, I wasn't a sickly child by any stretch, but I certainly had like all these niggly sort of things. And I can certainly see early evidence of being lit up quickly and intensely by refined carbohydrates, and did lots of strange, weird things with them, like hiding in the lazy Susan of my kitchen. I wasn't always a latchkey kid, but sometimes I'd come home and my mom was running errands or something like that, and the home would be big and lonely, and I've just come home from school, and I would go and crawl into the lazy Susan and eat raw macaroni.
Oh,
Right, raw. Like I would crunch it and it was just so pleasurable. And it would get gooey and gummy and it would get really rock hard, but I just keep working it over. And right, like looking back, that I was a prime candidate to fall in love with and to get really tangled up with these processed carbohydrates that for me really do light up my brain and create a very profound nervous system shift. So I well into my teens when I started having my menstrual cycle, like it kind of went viral for me. Like I started to have intense migraines, more depression, I gained weight, I started to get acne. And then by the time I rolled into my mid-20s, I was a mess. I was an absolute mess. I had a file in at the time I hit university, I had like this big file of if it wasn't one thing, it was another. And the crazy thing was, as miserable as I was also happy. Like I was like the skinny fat, like, I'm like, I love my life. I'm in university. I have amazing roommates. We have so much freaking fun together. I'm so charmed with the fact that I get to be in university and I'm having fun and I'm making friends and life is good. But on a Friday night, my friends and I would all go out to parties or socialize or whatever we would do. And they'd get up on Saturday morning and I would, and be fine. They'd have their breakfast, they'd get on with their Saturday and their Sunday, and maybe we'd party Saturday night too. And Sunday night, they'd go to bed, they'd sleep lovely. And Monday morning at 9 a.m., they could show up to calculus.
mm.
By Sunday night, I was a suicidal mess, absolute wreck. I had headaches. I felt awful. I'm like, how are they doing this? We eat the same, we live the same, like we look the same. Like what is different about my body and my so we ate craft dinner, I ate sugar, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and all my snacks in between. classic university student diet of like pancakes and cereal with extra sugar and bread and white toast and jam and, you know, and sandwiches and craft dinner and pizza and pop. And oh my God, it was all day long. How my friends and roommates were able to wake up, you know, and be fine is absolutely, that's the real like shocker. But I couldn't. And so it wasn't until I read, so I was in and out of the doctor's offices and they just kept sort of giving me more pharmaceuticals. And I knew it wasn't working. Something's not working. And the suicidal part was mostly around my migraines. They were so terrible. And at that point in time, they didn't have the triptan. So I was using Advil and Tylenol as like candy. And I was eating the candy and then taking the Tylenol to deal with the candy, but I didn't know what was going on.
Sure. Sure.
So I would sit in the dark with this blinding, pounding, horrible migraines, vomiting, wanting to die sincerely. And at the same time, like saying, body, I know you need something. I just don't know what. Like, just tell me, I'll do it. Honestly, I'll do it. What am I doing that you need me to stop? What am I not doing that you need me to start? And I kept looking and pulling for answers from doctors, pre-internet, right? Late 1980s. And so I just, yeah, I got lucky. I got lucky because a friend of mine sent me a copy of and she was older. She was a friend of a friend, actually, and she was kind of part of our crowd. And she sent me a copy of the book, The Sugar Blues. And I remember the moment when I looked down at this book. She's like, maybe this will help you with your migraines. And I looked at this little paperback book. I wish I had. I often share it in my interviews. I hold up this copy of this book that I have, 30 years, multiple moves, many, many, many moves. I have never let go of that book because it was such a pivot and turning point for me. But I remember looking down at it in like this slow-mo motion. I'm like, what? I was like really snotty. I was like, oh my God, what has this got to do with migraines? Please. What has sugar got to do with migraines? Like, oh my God, right? Toss the book, like as if. I have asked doctors, is it my diet? Is it something I'm eating? And they'll say, oh, no, it's a luck of the draw. You've just, you've got the genetics and, we'll just have to manage. We'll just have to find the right combination of pharmaceuticals. And at that point I was on T3s, which was codeine plus, oh gosh. Anyways, and I ate them all the time. I use them all the time. Then I get rebound headaches. And so one day though, when I was desperate enough to be open-minded, I took that book out and I read it. And I read it in 2 days. I would have read it in one if I could have stayed awake because it was riveting. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God, it's the frickin' food. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Why didn't anybody tell me all this suffering, all these years, all this like mystery of why is this such a major malfunction for me? So I was lit up and I knew, when you just know. And I knew this was yes, this is me. I am deeply, deeply affected by these refined carbohydrates. So I started the journey of unhooking from them. I was so motivated and I was so passionate. I was totally going to do it. And I planned it all out, but it was a little bit difficult for my little 20-something brain to figure out, wait a minute, what is there to eat? I eat this all day, every meal, every meal, every snack, every day. Like, what is there to eat? It was in salami, it was in bologna, like it was everywhere. So it took me a little while for my brain to figure out, well, you could eat chicken, you could eat brown rice, you could eat broccoli, you can eat salad. Oh, I could do that. So, right, like it seems really obvious to me today that, of course, there's an ocean of abundance of beautiful, delicious whole foods that you fall madly freaking in love with when you get the junk out. But at the time, it was an absolute mystery. So I figured that out and I started the path. And I remember going to my doctor's and I brought in the book and I was so enthusiastic and joyful and excited about this. Oh my God, I think I'm gonna, oh, I'm so excited. And the doctor was like, no, there is no connection between diet and disease. And she's like, that's not going to solve your migraines. It's not the root cause. I don't, it's not a bad thing to eat healthy food, Florence. Like, it's fine. And I deflated like a balloon. I literally collapsed into my body.
Mm.
And then I walked home and it was like I was just so discouraged. It was so, so despairing, actually. I was just like, oh, and doctors were gods. Doctors are still gods, right? But there was some part of me that rebounded because I thought, well, it's at least worth an experiment. It's worth trying. Like maybe she's wrong. She was wrong. But yeah, that wild, wild enthusiasm definitely got us. There was a huge fire hose of water that, sort of brought it back down to a tiny simmer, but it built back up. And I thought, okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to do this. And my roommates thought I was crazy. Everybody thought I was crazy. That's nuts. You can't do this. And it doesn't take long. It doesn't take long to figure out this shouldn't be this hard. This shouldn't be this hard. I am extremely motivated. I have very good reasons. I don't care if I eat Kraft dinner. Well, I do. I like it. Don't get me wrong, but I like chicken and broccoli too. And then in the failing, they're doing really great for 3 or 4 days and then failing and doing really great for a couple of weeks and then taking a bite and going back and then binging. And then all of a sudden, at some point, I realized probably about a year down the road that I wasn't really getting very far. On and off, on and off, on and off. And each on and off, it got worse. Each on and off, I started to now have a binge eating disorder. So I really do understand. I really understand the complexities of restriction because I didn't have a binge eating disorder before. I eat sugar all day long disorder before.
Exactly.
Right. And I just kept my sugar levels topped up. And so now all of a sudden I do these periods of restrictions and now I have this binge eating disorder and I'm like, oh my God, I am right messed up now. I've really done this. And maybe everybody was right. And maybe I shouldn't have even started on this path. And maybe the sugar blues is wrong and lots of struggle. There were no
Oh, yeah.
books that I had access to. Okay, that's not true. There was the sugar blues and there was White, Pure and Deadly by Yudkin. And in the back of those books were a whole bunch of little references and I wrote away hand letters mailed off to universities. Can I have those studies, please? Right. And I worked with my university's librarians. Can we bring these in? And a lot of them were obscure little references in medical journals. There was a study in 1968 in Laval University. Most people don't know about the study, have ever heard of it, but they studied mice. And I don't even know why they would have studied this, but they took these mice and they exposed them to the separation anxiety of taking these baby mice from their mothers. And they recorded the number of times that they peeped, were expressed distress, 300 on average in a minute. I think that's the right math. Anyways, 300, I remember that number, and whatever fraction of time, I think it was a minute. Then they gave them sugar and they counted, it dropped to 75. And they're like, wow, that is really interesting. It's almost like it's acting like a pain, like an opiate. Is sugar an opiate? And then what they did is they're like, well, if it's an opiate, if we give them naltrexone, which blocks the effects of opiate, then it should pop back up to 300. Well, Paige and Jamie, you both know that when they put in the naltrexone, it went back up to the 300, the baseline, right? They're like, unequivocally, there's evidence the sugar is acting like an opiate in the brain. So I'm getting all these obscure little pieces of nerdy science facts, right? And I'm the only person talking about this in my world. There's really not a lot of conversation in the newspapers or any sort of magazines. Like I was really profoundly, I was very, very alone on this. But I started to say to my friends, I think I'm addicted to sugar. Like I literally think I'm addicted to sugar. This should not be this hard. I shouldn't be racked with these kind of cravings, this obsession. Now I'm binging it. Like if I give up broccoli for a week, I'm not going to binge eat broccoli. I think these foods are addictive. And I remember very clearly, I had a friend named Remco, and I remember saying this, I swear to God, guys, I think I'm addicted to sugar. And he grabbed his hand and I remember him slapping his thigh and thinking, that's so funny, Flor. You can't be addicted to sugar. You need that to live. Like nobody's addicted to sugar. That's ridiculous, right? He thought it was so absurd. And most people probably still do. But I knew that sugar wasn't just harmful, that it was like really, really, really implicated in all of my mental and physical health issues. But I knew it was addictive. And I didn't care if anybody else on the planet, if I was the only human being that knew that this was gripping me in a way that did not make sense. Fine, so be it. I'm the only sugar addict on the planet. But I started to figure out that, okay, now what I'm trying to do with unhooking from ultra processed foods has now brought me into this like really complicated disordered eating problem now. And I thought, I wonder if a lot of women are struggling with disordered eating because of the complication of ultra processed foods. And I wonder if there's some sort of connection there. So this is 1992, 93 now. And Case Shepard's book was out. I didn't know there were 12-step programs. I had no way of finding them up in my little northern Canadian city. But Case Shepard's book was technically out, but I didn't know about it at the time. And Dr. Kathleen Day Maison's books were just being published. And the first time her first book came out, I went out and I bought it and I cried and I hugged it and I took it to bed. And I was like, oh my God, the world needs this. Thank you, Dr. Kathleen Day Maison, for being the first to come out with a really well-researched, incredibly knocked it out of the park. But just before that book came out, I'm, as a young academic, thinking there's something here. Like, I would love to unpack this academically.
Mhm.
So I applied to university, to Trinity College, Dublin, Ireland, because a girlfriend of mine had gone to Dublin, Ireland, absolutely freaking had the most amazing experience. And I flew over for her graduation, fell in love with, the whole like university. And they had a really powerful interdepartmental master's program. So I applied, and here was the thesis topic: to explore and unpack the potential connection between, at that point, I was just saying sugar, sugar addiction and disordered eating in women. They accepted me. Those bastards, they accepted me. So I thought they meant that, wow, we're really excited about this master's topic. Come over here, Canadian Florence and Canadian cowgirl, and let's unpack this. So I sit in front of the committee. There was 3 or 4 different people that were, I think they were trying to figure out who was going to be the best thesis supervisor. I think that's why there were several people here to kind of sort of, anyways, they're like, what have you got? Tell us about this. So these little obscure 1968 Laval University, these little references in these medical journals and Pure White and Deadly and, the Sugar Blues and different references and whatever I could find, and my personal experience. And I passionately talk about this topic. And I say, I'm really onto something here. I know it. Thank you for letting me do this master's topic. Anyways, we're kind of looking down, and we'll leave this with us. But they come back and they're like, yeah, sorry, you're going to have to pick a different master's thesis. There is no evidence to suggest that sugar is addictive or that it's harmful to the body.
Oh,
Yeah.
Did you feel
So
like
I
a
had
little bit of
spent all
bait
this
and switch?
money. I flew over to Ireland. I knew I was onto something.
Oh.
So there was this fire in my belly because I knew I was living it. I was
Mhm.
consciously living a struggle that, I now know multi-millions of us, that most women are 80% of women are on a diet, are on a diet, are struggling with food.
Oh,
What do I eat? Is that too much? Is that the right thing for we're a mess. It's really complicated, our relationship with food. And it's much more complicated, much, much more complicated because of the ultra processed food, biochemical, neurochemical factors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that was a little bit, how did you course correct in your master's program? What did you do?
You don't even want to know. I went off doing a really obscure topic about, it's almost embarrassing to say. I enjoyed it at the time. So in Europe, because this was an Ivy League European university, Europe is very interdisciplinary. So I could kind of pull from all different kinds of areas. So I actually did a feminist rereading of Plato's Cave. And
Very
it was really
interesting.
cool, but
Yeah.
but it wasn't what I wanted to write on. And so I still had this fire in my belly. And all that time I kept thinking, oh, then so I come back to Canada, I finished my master's, I come back to Canada, nothing, not 1 second since I read The Sugar Blues have I not been passionate about this topic. And then the internet comes on, and slowly there's more research and a little bit of talk about it, and I'm just glomming onto all of it. I'm still very alone, very, very isolated and alone with this, but the books are coming out. And then one day I get pregnant with my daughter. And at this point, year over year, I was making extraordinary progress. Like at that point, I was 90, 95. I've been 95% sugar, flour, ultra processed food free since my early 20s, right? But I just got better and better.
Yep.
But so by the time I was pregnant with my daughter, there was rare exceptions. But there was still some moments of obsession, of being triggered, of sort of pushing away from a party, but going home at night or driving home to get something on the way home from the social event, like that stuff was still happening. But I knew, boy, the minute I was pregnant, there was no way there was going to be any ultra processed foods in this body. It was so important to me that I did not create a baby with the same potential for this addiction. And so I was pretty good. I had a piece of pumpkin pie in October, and I was very sick. And I had a cheese sandwich at another time when I was really freaking hungry. And anyways, so I made those 2 exceptions. But other than that, I was a completely beautiful, vibrant, healthy, whole food woman who ran till she was 8.5 months pregnant. Wonderful pregnancy. It was great. And both times that I ate sugar and flour, let me tell you, I was so, so sick. Anyway, so fast forward, and I was very committed to not eating sugar flour when I was pregnant because I didn't want to be. I literally thought of it as like dripping sucrose into this beautiful, perfect little baby that I so did not want her to struggle with this. So I did great for the first year, and then I was a professor at the time, and I went back to university to teach. And I relapsed, and I relapsed. Yeah, I relapsed pretty hard. I mean, it's when you've been away from it for so long, a little, and it just, wow,
Yeah.
it's like a fresh drug. It's
Mhm.
love all over again. It's like so powerful. Just a little goes so long, goes so far. Anyways, I remember driving home from the university and dropping in to get my favorite chocolate chip macadamia cookies that in hindsight now, even just thinking about it makes me want to vomit. They were probably full of like Crisco and ugh, just junk. Anyways, but I ate 8 of the 12. And then I went to the daycare. I picked them up, and then I went to the daycare, and it was like the classic, like just being like my car drove itself there. I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. No, I have a baby. I don't want this, right? But I pulled in, grabbed the cookies, came back, and I had sort of said to myself, but only if they're perfectly cooked. Like if they're overbaked and they're a bit like brown or like overcooked, I'm not going to buy them. But they were
Bargains we make with ourselves,
the
right?
bargains, the bullshit. Anyways, but they, as I recall, I think I compromised slightly, but they were still within the window of I can eat those. 8, pick up Sky, take her home. She's in my arms. I'm nursing her. And I'm just like, I don't want to be doing this. Fuck, like, what is this? I am a highly intelligent, incredibly motivated. At this point, I'm a triathlete. I'm a long distance runner. I'm bright. I know the science. I know the science in a way that's cellular. That I had read every single piece of science. At that point, I can look you dead in the eye and say, if there's a piece of science on this topic, I've read it. I wrote to the universities personally. My librarian helped me bring it in. I know the truth about the harms of these processed refined carbohydrates. And what the hell? Anyways, that's not quite the end of this story. So I'm nursing Sky, and then so I have 4 cookies left of my little 12-pack that I bought. And I get up at some point in the night, and I wrap them up, and I stuff them in the garbage, and I tie up the garbage, and I pull on my Sorel boots, my big heavy winter boots, and my big heavy winter jacket, because it's the dead of winter, and I tromp through my backyard, all the deep snow, to get to the back where the garbage is, and I put it in the garbage, and I close it, and that's it, and I'm done, Paige and Jamie. I'm done. that's enough of this.
Mm-hmm.
The next morning at about
Mm-hmm.
o'clock in the morning,
I was waiting for the rest of the story.
right, my eyes pop open, and the first freaking thing I can think of is, oh my God, those 4 cookies are out in the backyard in the
Yep.
garbage.
Yep.
And I get on my goddamn jacket and I march through the snow in like the cold winter Canadian, and I grab them out and I eat them. And that's when I fell to my knees. It was that moment where I just thought,
Yep.
I'm throwing everything I've got at this. And mostly, I wasn't like I was binging. I was never ever returned to the days of those where I ate sugar all day long every day. But even just those occasional amounts, like most people, the amount that I was eating would say, that's exactly where I would love to get you. But it wasn't enough for my system.
Right.
Like not everybody's that sensitive, but I have a very
Everyone's different.
sensitive system. So I couldn't, even 95% was not enough for me. It was really helpful. My migraines mostly went away. My skin cleared up. My depression completely lifted, right? Like so many miraculous things happened by mostly getting it out. But those rare first bites still took me away into the addictive experience of cravings and obsession. And once you make when you make an exception once, the next day, my sugar dragon will say, well, you made an exception yesterday, so this is just as good a legitimate. And you're just like crazy. The food chatter, the urges, like, just stop. Just stop. And so I fell to my knees and I'm like, I was very agnostic at the time, like, universe, if there's anyone out there, please give me help. And so the next day, actually, I opened my newspaper and there was an ad for a 12-step program for food addiction recovery. I didn't even know they existed. At that point in time, there were 3 in Canada, 3 meetings in the entire freaking country in person, right? Because this particular program, you had to be in person. 3 in the entire country. One of them was in my small city, tiny Canadian city, tiny, like 80,000 people.
That's a God thing.
God thing, God shot, like something out there in that big wide universe heard me and said, honey, read the paper today, look at this page, go. So this guy, Ron, was the contact. I called Ron and Ron's like, oh, honey, you're one of us. Just come to a meeting. What? There's other people out there? Right? What? So I got into the 12-step program and, learned the fundamentals there of like the really powerful, simple little things we can do to support the elimination of cravings, because cravings are not normal. And so much of my addictive eating was not even about the strong desire for it. It was the incredible discomfort of having to sit with cravings that are not, it's such a distressing
Torture.
experience. Torture. It's a torture. It's so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable. So I would literally sometimes just go and eat something to
Right.
leave me alone. I don't even want to be eating. And I have the thought, I don't even want to be eating this. So yeah, the fundamentals, the 3 meals, no snacks, whole foods, enough protein, veggies, healthy fat. And oh my God, the cravings go away. And at that point in time in my journey, I really sincerely thought it was so freaking hard to get abstinent in the way this 12-step program defined it, like to be really, really consistent. Because I was used to kind of having exceptions every now and then and still struggling and suffering because of it. But I thought at that point in time that the whole goal was for me just to get abstinent. If I could just get abstinent and stay abstinent, I was successful. And I realize now that everything before the first bite is emotional. Everything. It's psychosocial emotional. And everything after the first bite for the first 7 to 10 days for most of us is the addiction. After that, right, we're going back to this is an upstream issue. And I didn't look at the upstream issues really all that well because I felt so much better off the sugar. I was young. When you give it up in your 20s and 30s, like you bounce back so well. And you think that, that's all I need to do. And it wasn't like I wasn't in and out of therapy, but I wasn't really understanding the big, big, big picture of what it means. I don't consider myself an addict. I am not an addict, but I have an addiction. I have a body that responds to sugar like the opiate it is. And not everybody can, and not everybody does. And I believe them when they say they can have a few cookies and not crave it like a maniac for 3 days. wow, really? Are you serious?
Right.
But they don't. All right, I'm not addicted to cigarettes, and it's not like I haven't tried them in university days because I had a boyfriend who smoked, and I thought it looked kind of fun and sexy and cool, and it's disgusting. Like, never going to be addicted to cigarettes. That's not going to happen. I'd have to work really, 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 really hard at it. But it was love at first sight for me with refined carbs and first taste, first bite, and that is the way my body's wired. And so the deepest part of my journey now has been realizing that, I think of it sort of as like three parts, that I was all very, very focused on the physical and mental pain, the depression, the migraines, the acne, the being overweight. So I was very overweight coming into my 20s. I started to drop sugar, felt so much better as I was getting traction year over year. I took up running. I became very athletic. Oh my gosh, I lived charmed years. Like, really, it brought me back my life in many ways. But because I didn't have that whole concept of abstinence, that idea of you can just break up. You can just break up with it. You don't have to do like little rendezvous. Remember, I had a boyfriend named Mark, and we'd do these breakups, and we were meant to break up. It was almost a great relationship, but it just wasn't quite fully lined up, and we both kind of knew it. But we'd miss each other, and we were all the drama of the 20s, the big cliffhanging. And anyways,
Right.
he'd throw pebbles at 2 a.m. on my window, and I'd be like, "Oh, it's Mark," and we'd come down. We'd have these great makeup moments, and that's what I would do with sugar. I
Yeah.
just kept going back for these rendezvous moments. And it
That's
wasn't
how Kate
until
describes it, a bad boyfriend,
Yeah,
right?
that's literally what I was going to say. Sugar's like a bad boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah, it really what and then someone, the 12 step comes along, well, we can just break up. You could just break up and move on.
Yeah.
And it's that horrible, painful period of the sense of loss and the grief and the will I ever be loved again, will I ever be happy again, will food ever taste that good again, or be as comforting, or is quick to take the edge off things that I'm going through. And so that journey gets to start. You put the food down, your stuff comes up, but I didn't have the same kind of understanding of what it means. What you really need to do to work with, put the food down, the stuff comes up. Because if you don't, put the food down and the stuff comes up and you don't know what you're doing with this, you're either going to suffer, you're going to be miserable. Like, yay, I'm sugar free, but I'm freaking miserable. I'm anxious. I'm overwhelmed all the time. I'm jangled. I'm like, ugh, this is no way to live. Or you're going to go back to the food.
Is you're feeling for the first time. You've numbed yourself out with the food, and now you're actually experiencing feelings. Ruh-roh.
Yeah. I felt a lot of feeling. I'm a feeler, and I feel a lot, and I feel deeply. So in my 20s and 30s and in my teens, I felt a lot, but I would constantly come in with sugar to, that I could only
Why not?
tolerate it so much before I was in the cupboard. So now, of course, today I realized that I was fearing the feelings, that the activation of feelings, the fear would come in, and then, the thoughts of food would come in. And so now I can see that all happening. And now it's a whole new world because the inner world is where all the richness is. I remember one time interviewing Jamie, and she
Mhm.
said something that so struck with me. It was so beautiful. And I hope I'm going to remember this correctly. You called it the inner sanctuary. And I think there was another beautiful word, like the beautiful inner sanctuary, or something like that. And I remember thinking, oh, that just so captures it. Yeah.
Yes.
That yay, we put the food down. We don't put the food down just because it will heal our bodies and minds, really sincerely help us heal our bodies and mind. Maybe it's not all we have to do. There's probably other repair work that we need to do, but it's a big piece. And a lot of people are lucky they put it down and they're off. Yay. But we put it down and we start to feel so much better physically, mentally, emotionally. And we can reconnect to our emotions again. And yeah, if we don't have the tools, we miss out on the fact that that's where all of the joy comes back in, that self-connection, that self-love, that capacity to connect to self and source and everything that makes life worth living. is actually through embodiment, is through the inner sanctuary.
Yeah, that's so true, because you can't even connect to yourself. If you're numbed out on food, yes, it affects the other relationships, but what about the relationship with yourself?
Sure.
Having a clue who you are and identifying your own needs and what do I like and what do I enjoy and what do I want? And if you're numbed out,
Who
nobody's
am I?
born.
Right? Who
Yeah,
am I is another good question that that bubbles up.
Who am I?
Who
Yeah.
am I and who do I want to be?
And I know I don't agree with the statement. I've heard it before that you need to love yourself to be able to before you can love someone else. That's just garbage. That's just garbage. I have deeply, deeply loved people. I still love them when I think about them, right? And I'm thinking about some ex-boyfriends or something. I've loved my dog, Sandy. I couldn't have loved a dog more, but it wasn't that I didn't have some access to self-love, but I was very disconnected from myself. And so I wouldn't say that I had the self-love all worked out, but because I knew what it felt like to love somebody else and to love my dog, Sandy, I, I didn't know that you could feel that way about yourself. Like that just seemed absurd. Like what? You can feel that way about yourself? Like who would feel that way about themselves? My inner critic was like, no, no, not until you fix this and that, and you do this and that, and you're better this. Like, oh my God. It was like,
brilliant.
it was literally like I was Cinderella and my inner critic was the stepmother. And when you're done the drapes, you can, it was never going to end. I was never, ever, ever going to be perfect enough till I could have that moment of feeling like I get to feel the same way about myself as I did about other people that I've loved.
So how has that, and I want to be mindful of time here as we head into the last few minutes together, but how has that journey evolved for you, Florence?
Yeah. So it's evolved into me understanding that for the most part, I was just obsessed with trying to get relief from my physical and mental symptoms.
Right.
The negative consequences of the compulsive and excessive consumption of refined ultra processed foods. But then I realized, okay, this is an upstream issue. And what's upstream is my self-care. So then I had to look at my self-care and move away from the junk self-care and really get disciplined about sleep and exercise and meditation, quiet and stillness, or the silence and stillness, and play and working with, and then I realized that the last part of my journey has been so lots of work around the self-care, dialing that in, getting that way, 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 way better. But I realized, that's not the end of the journey either. That's not enough. Getting sleep and exercising and doing it's great, but I have a dysregulated nervous system. I have trauma. And so the upstream of that was doing my trauma work. So that's where I'm at now. And that's where I'm working very deeply with self-regulation tools, learning. That's why I'm in somatic experiencing training. I realize now that I was saying everything before the first bite is emotional, always, always. And then after the first bite for the first 7 to 10 days, that's the addiction. It just takes over. It's a predictable cascade of events. You'll have cravings and obsession and withdrawal symptoms and, ups and downs, like that just happens. But once that's kind of cleared and you know how to eat enough whole foods and the right portions that work for your body, that sort of shifts. And then they might be minor cravings that you can handle. But if you don't, at that point, start to do your self-care and start to understand what's happening at the level of the nervous system, you're at really high risk of going back because you're going to suffer. And why wouldn't you go back if you're going to suffer? So
Yeah, that's the problem. It's the suffering, right? We're trying to minimize the suffering.
we're trying to get out of the suffering that sugar causes, only to sort of give it up and then suffer in a totally different way and be equally ill-equipped. It's just terrible. So, right. So you realize, oh my gosh, there's things we need to do after we put the food down and our stuff comes up. What do we bring in here so that this transforms? This transforms into a life that is joyful and peaceful and exciting and also full of all of the emotions that are run the gamut from really painful to really joyful.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
Everybody wants to be off processed foods. I mean, there's not a person out there that if they could just give it up, whether it's processed foods, alcohol, gambling, whatever, if they could just give it up, they would. But obviously people struggle when it comes to giving it up because it is so highly addictive. And I'm sure you've experiences like we've talked about the ups and downs of being successful with it. So for those that are listening, do you have any strategies for getting off processed foods? Maybe if there's one that stands out greater than anything else as a non-negotiable when trying to get off processed foods for those that are listening that might be helpful for them on their journey?
Oh man, to nail it down to one, right? That's really tough. I
You can
think,
do two.
okay. I think working at the level of the matrix. So I think about the matrix as, the physical universe. And there's the quantum field. There's the metaphysical, spiritual realm. And we are spiritual beings having this physical experience. And we need to understand, how to support our body at the physical level. And so just working at the level of the matrix, I would say working with your 3 meals or 2 meals, a lower carb, get the trigger foods out. Job number 1 is to get rid of the damn cravings. Now, they might pop up here and there, but we just got to get them below like a 3 out of 10. Then you can manage it, right? It's not like freaking torture to not scratch an itch that's really, really itchy, right? Like, who wants that? So get rid of the cravings, start there. You do that by there's 10 really common trigger foods for people who fall on the ultra processed food addiction spectrum. They are sugar, flour, sweeteners, alcohol, high sugar fruits, grains, nuts and seeds, caffeine, chocolate, and
You
what's the
got to
other?
come up with the last one, man. Don't leave us hanging.
Don't leave you hanging.
I won't be able to sleep tonight.
I think it's starchy root vegetables, like potatoes and sweet potatoes, I think. Well, I consider that a grain, so I think I'm cheating there. No, it
No,
isn't a grain, I know, but like the
no.
starchy.
Gotcha.
Maybe it'll come to me. And then you think, oh my God, what?
Right.
But what a cool experiment to run. You can always go back. Dairy's the other one. Dairy's number 10. Gosh, not one to forget. Cheese. So what happens here? Let me just tell you now, let me save you a 10 years of experimentation right here. You're going to put the sugar down. Let's just say it's the real white refined sugar and you get that far, right? You're going to put that down. The flour is going to come up. You're like,
Right.
oh, wow, I'm really, really eating lots of bread these days. Really loving bread. Thank God it's okay. And then you realize, wait a minute. Oh, no. Oh, no. It's not a back door into this addiction response, right? Sting. Okay. So then you struggle and fight with the bread and you get the gluten down and that's down. And then what's going to come up? Sweeteners. Maybe this isn't the exact order for you, but something like this. Sweeteners are, it's just stevia. Monk fruit. It was blessed by a monk, probably. I'm going to eat it.
Yeah.
So then the sweeteners, and you got to put the sweeteners down. And then maybe all of a sudden you didn't even realize that you liked wine. Oh, I had no idea. I like red wine. Thank God it's so healthy for me. Till you realize, dang, why is this starting to sort of crowd out my peace of mind? The alcohol comes down, the cheese, and then it's the nuts. And then if it's like, so let me just tell you, let me save you 10 years. Just drop all 10, get yourself on a really good 30-day experiment and just let it all go for 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, oh my God, you can go back, right? But just give yourself the chance to see how you feel, how you think, what life is like. You're going to feel miserable, and slowly it'll start to feel better. And then hopefully by the end of the 30 days, you will at least have data.
Yeah.
Do I feel better? And you can literally ask your body, is this better? And mostly it will say, yeah, you were right.
It's so interesting with like those nuts. I have some nuts and they're usually always measured out and I usually do fine, but every once in a while I'll get a hankering for peanut butter and all of a sudden I find myself with a spoon and the jar and I'm like, well, I guess I'm not. So it's so interesting how sometimes you can be okay with it and sometimes
Yeah. Right. That's right. There's such an ebb and flow, which is the upstream issues, right? Which is all the emotional, psycho, spiritual social stuff that what's happening at the level of the nervous system. So that's a cue. Okay, great. Wow. Okay, great. I get to drop in and sort of get a sense of what's this about? What do I get to learn? And it becomes interesting
Very true.
because if we knew what this sudden peanut butter like craving was about, well, we just don't. We don't until we drop in. And when we drop in, then we get all these interesting insights. Ah,
Very
thank
true.
you for that. Thank you for helping me see that. And it
Mhm.
helps us navigate our life.
Mhm.
Don't you think the
Florence.
ultimate goal? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jamie.
No, ask a final question.
Or you,
Go
you,
ahead.
okay. Don't you think just that ultimate goal is just looking for that inner peace, that inner calm?
It is.
And so of those 10 foods, I mean, as you were saying that, I was thinking if it robs you of your peace, it's on it's on the list, whatever that looks like.
Totally. And for many people, the sugar, flour, the sweeteners, the alcohol, they probably stay down. Maybe
Yeah.
there's rare exceptions of people who can do a glass of wine every now and then, or they can do a bit of stevia. Great. We all fall on a spectrum. There's zero judgment. It's your body. It's your truth. And you'll know that you don't have it quite right when that piece isn't there, and you'll feel aligned. It's just a resonance. And maybe it changes over time. Like what you used to be able to eat, you
Good
can't
point.
later after menopause, or vice versa. You can go
Yeah.
back to grains, you can go back to dairy, you can go back to nuts.
Yeah.
The only things that we probably, every human being on the planet, it doesn't matter if you have this kind of craving, hooked, addictive like reaction to these foods, are the ultra processed foods. No one should be eating ultra processed foods.
Right.
Yeah, no one really. And some
That's right.
people can get away with it, but most of us aren't. Even if they look like they're getting away with it, they're not.
Right.
Go up and ask them, are you on a medication?
Right. It's progressive.
Very
Yeah.
true. Well, Florence, thank you for your time and for sharing your story. I'm very grateful to you for the interview all those years ago and for your time again today and for the work that you do in this field and also for how you've been honest about the progression of your recovery and how that's led you to, away from just focusing only on abstinence to looking at a much bigger picture of, trauma-informed therapy and healing that can come once we sort of see what needs to be enlightened. So I'm very grateful for you and for your time today.
Wonderful. And if you want to know more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. And we hope to see you again next time. Thank you again, Florence. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.